My name is Eleanor May Whitaker, and I am 130 years old. I was born in 1896 in a small white farmhouse outside Topeka, Kansas, when horses pulled wagons down dusty roads and kerosene lamps lit the night. I have lived in 3 centuries, the 1800s, the 1900s, and the 2000s, and I have learned that time itself does not speed up, people do. When I was a child, my father would read the newspaper aloud and speak of President William McKinley as though he were a distant neighbor whose decisions drifted all the way to our porch. I remember the smell of coal smoke in winter and the weight of silence when news of World War I reached our town. My brother enlisted and returned thinner, older in the eyes, and quieter than before. That war took pieces of men that never grew back. In 1918, influenza swept through our community, and I learned how fragile breath is as church bells rang almost daily. In 1920, I stood in line to vote for the first time, my hands trembling with pride, understanding that progress is never gifted. It is fought for. I married a mechanic named Harold during the hopeful hum of the 1920s, only to face the crushing weight of the Great Depression after 1929, when banks failed and bread lines stretched longer than anyone's patience. We survived on beans, grit, and the stubborn refusal to give up. In 1941, after Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt called it a day of infamy, and the country marched into World War II. Harold enlisted, and I worked in a factory assembling aircraft parts, my soft hands turning rough with metal and grease. He came home alive in 1945, which felt like a miracle in itself. The 1950s brought television into our living room, and I watched the coronation of Elizabeth II on a flickering black and white screen, astonished that images could cross oceans. In the 1960s, I listened as Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of his dream, and I believed change, though slow and painful, was possible. In 1969, I wept as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. I had been born in a home without electricity, and now humanity was walking on another world. Harold died in 1978, and grief stretched time in ways decades never could, but I kept waking up each morning. That is one secret to living long. You keep waking up. I learned to send emails in my 90s, watched the towers fall in 2001 with the same cold shock I had felt decades earlier during wartime, and in 2020, at 124, I lived through another pandemic, marveling at how quickly science could respond compared to the influenza of my youth. People ask my secret, expecting rare diets or magic remedies, but the truth is simpler. I drank coffee, ate pie on Sundays, walked whenever I could, forgave fully, loved deeply, and stayed curious. Curiosity keeps the spirit breathing. I have buried siblings, friends, my husband, and even a child. Longevity is not a prize. It is a responsibility, because you become a keeper of memories for those who can no longer speak. I have held horse reins and smartphones, written letters by lamplight and sent messages across the world in seconds. 3 centuries have passed before my eyes, and yet people still want what they always wanted: love, safety, dignity, and to be remembered. I am not afraid of death. When you have lived this long, it feels less like a thief and more like an old acquaintance waiting patiently. If there is one reason I have lived 130 years, it is this: I paid attention to history, to heartbreak, to small joys, to the taste of strawberries and the warmth of sunlight on my hands. A long life is not built from extraordinary days but from ordinary ones you choose to notice. I have stood at the edge of 3 centuries, and each time the future looked frightening, uncertain, overwhelming, and each time humanity endured, and somehow, so did I.